the Southern MPO to order. I'd like to welcome Ray Breslin as we have a guest today.
Yay.
We'll follow the usual procedure. It could have an action for the minutes of October 24th.
I'll move the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any corrections or omissions? Okay, not hearing anyone wishes to make it. Sylvia, do you want to do a roll call and approval on the minutes?
I do. And just, we have a couple of people, I know you cannot change your names, so on the thing, that's one of our safety precautions. So when I get to you, if you can just let us know who you are, those are our virtual friends. So let's see, at the moment, unless someone's come in and I didn't notice, I don't believe we have anyone from Auburn or Bedford, which is unusual. And no one from Candia, I believe. So let's move to Chester, where we have in-house Andrew Haddock. Thank you. And Deb Munson.
And yes.
No one from Deerfield yet. From Derry, we have in-house Jeff Moulton.
Here and yes.
And Richard Tripp.
Here and yes.
From Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart.
Here and yes.
And Gary Schneckenberg.
Here and yes.
From Goffstown online, we have Colleen.
Also Alfred Eisenberg here from Francistown.
Oh, that's Alfie. Hey, Alfie.
Hi.
Thank you, Alfred. And we have Colleen Mayu. Oh, thank you, Linda.
Good morning here, and I'm abstaining on the minutes.
Thank you. We have no one from Hooksett yet, but from London.
Barbara Griffin from Goffstown is here in person.
Good
morning.
Good morning. All right, I am very happy to see Barbara Griffin from Goffstown. So here and on the minutes.
Yes.
Thank you. Has anyone from Hooksett arrived yet? No. I don't know who our phone caller is, so eventually we hope to know. From Londonderry in-house, we have Art Rugg.
I'm here and yes on the minutes.
And online, we have Suzanne Brunel.
Yes, here and abstain on the minutes.
Thanks, Suzanne. From Manchester in-house, we have Peter Capano
Here and yes.
and Ray Clement.
Here and yes.
Online, we have Marcus Ponce de Leon.
Here and yes.
Thank you. And Dan O'Neill.
Here and yes on the minutes.
Thanks, Dan. In-house from New Boston, we have Mark Sunan.
Here and abstain.
No one yet from Ware, and from Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin.
Here and yes.
Also, voting MPO members, we have in-house Lucy St. John from New Hampshire DOT. And we are so happy about that. And we have Bill Watson online.
Good morning.
Morning. So now for those who I'm not sure who you are, let's go to the phone caller ending in 9149. You remain a mystery. You are on mute. I think it's a *6 if memory recalls. All right, that will remain a mystery. Oh, no.
There I am. Sorry, Sylvia. This is Rudy Cartier from Candia.
Aha, Rudy, thank you for that.
I'm actually traveling, so I'm eventually going to have to get off, but I'm in the car, so I'm going to keep on mute.
All right, thanks, Rudy. Much appreciated.
Welcome.
And so and also just to mention a non-voting member we have from DS, Vanessa Partington.
Good morning. Sorry, I was having difficulty connecting. Thank you.
All right.
Looks like we have some from Central and
We have,
Southwest as well.
yep, we have visitors from Central and Southwest, and I see Ben Bennett from our Londonderry planner. So from Central, who's that?
This is Craig Tufts. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Craig. And from Southwest?
This is Henry Underwood. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. All right, does that cover everybody?
We do have a wild mix of characters today, huh?
Underwood, and just walking in. Ah, yes, that is from the town of Deerfield, Errol Rhodes. In person, thanks, and this is Errol's first meeting, so everyone give Errol
Oh, we have another with Bedford.
no, that's Manchester.
Sorry.
Close, that's Don Waldron for the record.
Okay,
So, full house. Sorry,
okay, still be any old business.
I really hope not, no. No,
Okay,
keep us going.
okay, new business, Southern New Hampshire fiscal year 2023-2026 TIP amendment number 3. Nate, would you go over that for us? And this is something we will have to adopt.
See if I can do this properly. All right, folks, we don't have a mouse today, so I'm working on this little mouse pad on the laptop, and it's not my favorite thing. It doesn't like me very much. Okay. Okay, I think we're there. Can everybody see this online as well?
You're good.
All right, wow. Okay, so picking up where we left off at our last month's meeting, today is our formal public hearing to consider adoption of TIP amendment number 3. Oops. So just as a refresher, I reviewed the details of all of the project changes in TIP amendment number 3 in detail at last month's meeting. Some would say excruciating detail at last month's meeting. We did release TIP amendment number 3 on Monday, November 6th. We held a 10-day public comment period. That public comment period ended Friday, November 17th. We did receive one public comment from New Hampshire DOT about a statewide training program. I'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. We did present TIP amendment number 3 as well to our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee. We did not have a quorum in the room, but we had a number of members present, both in person and online. We just didn't have a physical quorum in the room, but we had many participants online. And all of the members of the TAC, even though they couldn't conduct business, there was a unanimous endorsement among those members present that the MPO adopt TIP amendment number 3. So today is the public hearing to consider adoption. I want to talk briefly about the one public comment from New Hampshire DOT that we received. It's about the statewide training program, which is an annual training program. New Hampshire DOT is proposing to add additional funding in 2024 to 2020 through 2026 in that program, ranging between $550,000 and $750,000 per year of supplemental funding in that program. The reason for that proposed amendment is DOT's anticipated workforce development needs. The Department of Transportation does have federal surface transportation block grant funding available to support these additional training efforts for their workforce, and DOT has indicated to us that there will be no impact to overall fiscal constraint on the TIP by incorporating this change. So for all of those reasons, we do recommend adopting this project change as part of TIP amendment number 3. Again, that was a comment that came in during the public comment period. Again, I did walk through all of the projects in detail last month. I'm happy to do that again right now. I'm also happy to spare you all from that. If you want to be so spared, it is up to all of you. So I would defer to you, Mr. Chairman, to talk with the board. And if anybody wants me to walk through all the projects, I can. If not, we'd welcome any questions or comments on.
Okay, is there anyone that would like Nate to go into further detail? Not hearing anyone wish. Yes.
I do have a question.
Yep.
You said that the training amount is going to be increased by $750,000. What is it currently?
It's currently $250,000 per year in each of the 4 years of the
Okay, thank
TIP.
you. That's, I just need to know.
Yeah, 2024 will go up to 800,000, and then I believe 25 and 6 will be $1 million a year each.
Now, the question is, does anyone want Nate to go into further detail on the TIP amendment? Anyone in the room? Not hearing anyone?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I don't want him to join everything. I would like to ask.
Well, yes, the next part 2 of this, he will be asking questions, but I'm just trying to get a sentiment of the crowd. And those calling in, do you want Nate to go into all the detail of the TIF amendment? Okay, not hearing anyone wish Nate to do that. Nate will now accept questions. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nate, refresh my memory on what exit 6-7 did in this funding proposal.
Let's see. So the in this TIP amendment, the change was to add engineering phase funding in fiscal 25 and 26. So it is. No, it's at there wasn't any engineering funds program for 25 or 26 for exit 6 and 7 in the TIP. So those funds are being programmed in those years.
Was added.
So engineering work will continue in those years as a result of this TIP amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with questions in the room for Nate? Anyone calling in would like to ask Nate questions regarding the TIP amendment? Okay, let's move right along. Could I have a motion to adopt the TIP amendment number 3 as amended by the state DOT? Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your hands. Calling in, could you indicate what you're okay? Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it passes.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Nate. Next item, climate action toolkit, roadway adaptation. Suzanne, you're on.
All right, thank you, everyone. You'll see Nate and I coordinated our outfits today. I'm also going to be joined by Zach, who's he'll be presenting remotely to protect us all from Thanksgiving illness. So let's go ahead and again, I apologize for the complications of working without a mouse, but how do I bump this? It's not Control L to bump it into, there we go. Okay, this should be in full screen, please, for folks online.
Yes, looks good.
Thank you, Tammy. Okay, so all of you have heard me periodically present about the work we've been doing over the last year on developing a climate action toolkit that's focused on roadway adaptations. We held a really fantastic regional workshop back in April in Derry. We've done some technical analysis. We've had some great connection with other RPCs and various folks, even folks in this room who've kind of weighed in and given some feedback. I've been told I only have 15 minutes for Zach and I to present. So I'm basically seeing this as a sneak preview, kind of a commercial for a product that we will have available online in the next few weeks. So I'm really excited to share this with you all before the holidays, and we'll keep getting the word out in the new year and highlighting various aspects of this toolkit, because I really want this to be useful for folks in our communities.
You can go a little longer.
Oh, really? I got
Nate.
never told you that.
Steam escaping.
I'll pretend I didn't hear that. So starting with the table of contents, basically we have an introduction providing background on all of the inputs that went into this. Chapter 1 provides the the kind of overview of the state of the region in terms of climate change. Chapter 2 is the technical analysis. Chapter 3 has a menu of strategies. Chapter 4 looks at, how do we start implementing this? And there's a series of appendices will be part of this as well. You've heard a lot about some of this material. So today's presentation is going to focus on 2 aspects that we haven't delved into in much depth before. And so we'll focus on the technical analysis that Zach's worked on, as well as some kind of adaptation in action. How do we put these tools to work? But I want to kind of give you the whole picture. So just as a quick refresher, for chapter 1, we are basically pulling from multiple resources around, what are the projections for climate change? We're drawing from federal resources, from fantastic research that UNH has done, but really trying to provide a condensed snapshot of where we're headed. And as you've all heard from me many times, temperatures are getting warmer. It's also getting a lot wetter. We basically, as the atmosphere is able to absorb more moisture because of the warmth, we're getting greater precipitation, higher levels of precipitation, and more volatile events. As you can see from this photo here, this happened July of this year, right, Andrew? There was a washout on Lane Road in Chester when a beaver dam collapsed. And, this is a major issue for a lot of the communities throughout New Hampshire and in this region. So that's part of the reason why we're doing this toolkit. Infrastructure vulnerability is a really critical issue. And we think by starting with our focus on roadway adaptations, we can keep building upon this conversation and creating a more resilient region. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zach. Zach, I imagine you don't want to be on screen, so or do you want me to show your face?
And I mean, you can show me if you want, but the presentation is what matter.
Okay,
Can you guys
great.
hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. Sorry I can't be there with you all this morning, but my nieces are adorable, but a public health hazard. So I'm sparing you of that. Sylvia, the pizza still hasn't been delivered to my house. So if you could call them about that, and remind them, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
So as Suzanne mentioned, we are building on what we did for the vulnerability assessment. And at this time, we want to focus on just federal aid roads and then look at them on a more corridor level. So we have 1,200 federal aid eligible lane miles in our region. That does not include every route. So Route 47 in Francistown and Route 149 in Ware are both not federal aid eligible because they are minor collectors. Next slide, please. Oh, and I should say, since as Suzanne mentioned, we are a little more time constrained here. I go into much greater detail in this during the last TAC meeting. So if you have questions, you might want to go back and watch that TAC meeting where we basically explain everything to the utmost detail. So like I mentioned, we were going to focus on federal aid roads. We're also looking at stream crossings, but we wanted to expand that to steep slopes and just flood prone areas in general, and then take a more take a more corridor level approach. Next slide. So we updated the rubric and we simplified it for a large extent. And we looked at 5 factors. One is AADT. One was the structural condition of the asset. One was how it performed during the 10-year hydrologic vulnerability assessment, whether during a 10-year storm, whether it overtopped, failed, or is vulnerable to it. Then we also looked at geomorphic compatibility, which is how well does the structure match the alignment of the river in which it's placed. And then we also looked at this history of flooding, whether it's in a FEMA flood zone or had been identified by a local hazard mitigation plan. Next slide, please. So we ended up with 364 stream crossings that were scored. And these are stream crossings within 200 feet of a federal aid road. And bridges in general were excluded unless they were very, very small or failed during a hydrologic event. Next slide, please. So here's a histogram showing how different things scored. So the higher the score, the more vulnerable it is. So a score of 0 would be the least vulnerable. A score of 25 would be the highest. That was the highest because we didn't see that. We saw ones up to about 20. And so you can see that most are around 6, 7, 8. The highest scoring was Parameter Road in Londonderry, which is not a federal aid road, but it is within 200 feet. The culvert is right at the intersection of those two roads. The second highest was High Street in Derry, which just as happens will be replaced as part of the 4A project. Next slide, please. So this is a big list. I'm not expecting you to look at this and memorize everything. This is just an example of what will be in the report. So this is a table showing the top 20 high scoring stream crossings region wide. This will be built, broken down out by town and by town management. So if you're interested in just your town and you're just interested in your town owned assets, there will be a table for that you don't have to go through the whole region wide. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what this looks like in practice. This is culvert 10248. It's in Hooksett on West River Road 3A. You can see that it gets about 21,000 cars per day. It's in fair condition, but during a 10-year storm, it'll fail. It's only partially compatible with the stream that it's placed in, and it's in the 1% chance annual flood zone. So it got a 15.8 out of 25. Next slide, please. But we also want to look at corridors as a whole and not just individual stream crossings like we did before. So we did this in two ways. One was looking at the number of the density of the stream crossings, which is the number of stream crossings per the linear miles of whatever the corridors we were looking at. But you might have, just a few stream crossings, but they all might score really high. In that case, we want to, show those as well. So what we consider the aggregate stream crossing vulnerability, which is we just added up all the stream crossing scores on that corridor and divided by the linear miles. Next slide, please. And here is the results, just going from highest vulnerable density to lowest. And this look on the left is the stream crossing density. On the right is the aggregate stream crossing density. And for both these, they've just been, whatever the highest was, got rescaled as 100. See that, if you ever scores high, 101, both the expressway and the non-expressway. But there are some other, local, more non-expressway routes that score high. Two is there for both statistics. Next slide, please.
Zach, your microphone is a little wonky. I don't know if you're moving at all.
I didn't think, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I was playing with the other headset, so I'll put it in my ear so I don't do that. But you might say, 102 is a really long route. It goes all the way from, Londonderry to, goes from Hudson to Raymond. That doesn't really help me very much. So we then broke it out by individual towns. So this is looking at all the non-expressway routes based on the aggregate stream crossing vulnerability in by town. So you can see that the top scoring here is 114 in Bedford, is by far scored the highest. And the next highest I believe is Wyndham 28. Next slide. We also looked at just general flooding vulnerability, and this is how close are you to a flood zone? So anything with a road within 200 feet of a flood zone, or a FEMA flood zone, or a flood hazard in a hazard mitigation plan. So that we had 130 linear miles that are in that. It's okay, go ahead. And again, this is just breaking it down by town. So this is all the non-expressway routes with a 200-foot flood zone or flood hazard. And this is looking at the percentage. So if we look, the highest scoring here is New Boston, New Hampshire 113, New Hampshire 13. And now, so of the area within 200 feet of that road, 42% of it is in a flood zone or floodplain. Next slide. And as just mentioned, we also looked at steep slopes. So in this, we classified, looked at areas over 25% slope within 200 feet of a federal aid road. And it's just, again, on the right showing, the ones that scored the highest are, 3A, 93, 293. A lot of the expressways score higher in general because they've had more earthwork to make the roads flatter. So those, you probably want to break out the expressways from the non-expressways. Next slide, please. And this is just doing the same thing that we saw before, breaking it down by town. So as we saw before, 3A scored really high, but if we look at it, Hooksett, 24% of 3A, and Hooksett is within 200 feet of a flood zone. So it's the score is high. And some other ones scoring high would be, let's see, New Hampshire 13 in New Boston, or 114 in New Boston or Bedford. Next slide, please. So we've tried to bring this together to look at a holistic corridor approach. Here's this example of New Hampshire 13 in New Boston. Its aggregate stream crossing vulnerability is actually fairly low. And so that's good, but the overall flooding vulnerability is higher. It's got because if you know 13, it just goes right along the river, which makes it very scenic and fun to drive, but also higher risk. And steep slope, it also scored a moderate risk because again you have that river embankment right there. Next slide, and I believe I'm done. Yeah.
Thank you, Zach. So Zach did really fantastic, very detailed statistical analysis. He really was the hero of that chapter. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about chapter 3 because we've talked about the kind of menu of strategies in previous sessions. It was a big component of our regional workshop we held in April, where we got feedback on some key strategic opportunities to advance climate adaptation in our roadways. The major themes that are addressed, though, are design and engineering, and having climate-ready standards, nature-based solutions, where we're really working symbiotically with kind of the natural elements of our communities to capture stormwater, to improve stream beds, to really make sure that we're preserving wetlands, et cetera. Operations and maintenance, again, reflecting on how the past is no longer the predictor of future events, and we need to be more flexible and responsive in terms of our seasonal maintenance considerations. Outreach and collaboration efforts, because this is a big challenge that we're not going to be able to tackle alone. And then, of course, being as up to date as possible with our data resources and ensuring that we're really thinking about climate in terms of all of our planning and policy activities. There's something that you'll find in the toolkit. We created a tear sheet. So there's basically a handy checklist you can go down. So there's within each of those 5 themes, there'll be a list of strategies, a description of relative scale. Are we talking about a specific site? Are we talking about a corridor as a whole? Are we talking about system-wide change? And some examples of how that might be implemented. The reason why we made it kind of a checklist menu of strategies, we don't expect that every community will be able to do everything, but we know that there's probably something on that list that each community can do. So we want to provide that range of opportunity. And then I just want to close out with a little bit of discussion of the adaptation and action chapter, because we know that, Zach's analysis is very thorough and wonderful. We have some great ideas from the kind of menu of strategies that were put together through our engagement activities. But we also know that there's so much to bring to the table in terms of kind of local on the ground experience and just knowledge about what's most vulnerable in our communities. Andrew Haddock, I want to kind of give him a note of thanks for being so forthcoming with volunteering to help us kind of do a case study for 102 in Chester. And this is a really significant east-west corridor in our region. Chester is very aware of flooding vulnerabilities. You saw just in the picture earlier in the deck. And so Andrew did a great job. He brought together police, fire, and highway representatives, and we all sat down together and basically brought Zach's data to the table, the menu of strategies to the table, and had a bit of a work session. And we worked together to identify the 3 most vulnerable, or the 3 top priority sites that the town is interested in addressing in terms of flood concerns. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about those individual sites, but I want to share some big picture takeaways that came out of our conversation that I think are really helpful. One, through that discussion, we really discovered that this corridor analysis approach is super important for calling attention to, there's cascading flood impacts across property lines, across town lines. And if you just think solely on a site by site, culvert by culvert basis, sometimes you lose that big picture. But when we started to really dive into this conversation, we realized, well, there's vulnerable sites that are right across the town line in Raymond or Derry. There's a private dam that's slated for removal that's going to have an impact on 102. There are local roads that are not FED-aid that might have blocked culverts that need to be considered. So that was a really important kind of takeaway that might impact the kind of the three thematic areas I've had outlined below in terms of design, outreach and collaboration, and planning and policy. We also, another key takeaway is that it's really essential to identify symbiotic solutions. There's some tension sometimes between human development and wildlife, and we can actually use nature-based solutions to tackle those effectively. We probably spent about 45 minutes talking about beavers. I feel like it could have been like a podcast or something. People had a lot of passion and interest. And this is something that the town of Chester is actively working on now in terms of identifying and monitoring beaver impoundments, installing beaver deceivers in the most critical locations to kind of keep water levels managed even as the beavers are doing their work. So that's, I feel like there's a couple of great strategic examples coming out of that as well. And then, of course, this is something I'm sure we can all relate to. Across the state of New Hampshire, there's staffing shortages in almost every sector. And when we were sitting around that table, we're like, man, like everybody here is doing about 3 to 5 jobs. And when we're talking about something as challenging as climate change, we need to get the public involved and get communities engaged in building awareness about what these issues are, and perhaps even pitching in from a volunteer standpoint. If there's an impending storm and people can keep their own driveway culverts clear, that can go a long way. So we talked about that's definitely something for us to tackle with, and the public outreach component is going to be really key as well. At the end of the chapter, we conclude with kind of a detailed analysis of really thinking through the life cycle of an asset and how various strategies might apply throughout the life cycle of a particular road or bridge or culvert. We also I really delved into a peer-reviewed journal article about the cost implications of roadway adaptations. I'm not going to kind of go into a lot of detail there, but some really important takeaways from that. Number one, it's important to be proactive. That's going to save us in the long run. Being really, we're going to be really careful about. But the more we can take action and have foresight about what's coming down the pipeline, the better off we'll be in terms of not having the kind of road washout emergencies that communities are responding to. It's important to reduce greenhouse gases because there's a kind of higher level and lower level emission scenario. Things will end up being a lot more manageable if we can keep greenhouse gases to a lower level of scenario. And then, of course, building public awareness. All of this work is going to feed into other climate planning work that we're doing. We're going to be mindful of how to integrate these ideas into our regional transportation planning efforts. We are actively getting involved with creating a resilience improvement plan. And I think this work is going to springboard into that. So get ready to keep talking about these issues. And we're going to be working on climate action plans with the state of New Hampshire, as well as there are certain communities that are encapsulated in the greater Boston MSA. And so there's a lot of opportunities to talk about where we can strategically prioritize greenhouse gas mitigation and hopefully make ourselves eligible for additional federal funding to support those efforts. And the vision is that we will have, a future that is resilient, that's thriving. We're addressing greenhouse gas mitigation. We're adapting our infrastructure to kind of meet the needs of our region. So with that, I think I'll close out right there and open it up to questions.
Any questions for Suzanne or Zach in the room? Barbara.
Thank you. 2 things. One is to nature and one is to funding. I appreciate having to work with nature, but my only comment will be it's going to win one way or another. And I will very quickly tell the story of Goffstown with a bridge replacement. And I understand this is culvert examination, not bridge, but similar circumstances could arise where a very rare river snail was discovered. And we worked diligently with St. Anselm's College to relocate the snails during the bridge reconstruction. There was a demolition, a new bridge. It was a huge project. St. Anselm's maintained the snails, returned them, and I think it took about 4 weeks for the otters to eat them. So, I just say that because I would like to sort of keep everything in perspective. And from that standpoint, we were talking about roads that are federal dollar road. So 114 being from Goffstown is close to my heart. I know the culvert you refer to in Bedford very well. But 114 is a state maintained road. Unless you're in an urban compact area, for example, Goffstown has an urban compact and we're responsible for 114 in that area. So from a regional planning commission where I'm here from my community as a representative, what is this doing for my community and road work? Because if you're working on a culvert at 114 out as you go out to where we have a lot of river issues, that's the state is coming in and doing that. We're not doing that as a community. So I'm not sure whether the outcome of this is to provide support to our communities for their structures, or is this really part of a regional climate carbon greenhouse initiative?
Yeah. Zach, I'll let you jump in, but I would say that this is intended to do a number of things. Number one, I feel like this is creating a common vocabulary so that we can all start talking about the challenges of climate change in relation to transportation planning and have, you know, a common set of strategies, data to draw upon that we can update regularly and kind of map out, you know, how we can start to implement this. And some of this it's going to be complicated. I mean, I feel like the major takeaway from the workshop that we held in April that had representatives from the state, from the federal government, from various RPCs, from like local communities, you know, is that this is incredibly challenging to hash out. This toolkit is not going to be like, oh, we're done. Here's the Band-Aid to slap on and everything's fixed. So I completely agree that we do need to, the further we can scale out and have climate ready standards that everyone is using across borders, like across municipal borders at the state level or at the national level, the more we can be assured that our future will be more resilient because everybody's kind of in compliance with those climate ready standards. So there's work to be done. And this is basically our offering on the table to help continue that work.
Additional questions in the room? Yes, please.
Since you use the lane road washout as an example, do you believe that to be a climate-induced failure or a beaver management failure?
It's probably a little of both. It's a good example, it's a good visualization of what we're going to see more of. Because, you know, there obviously is a beaver component there, but as we get to have more extreme precipitation events that are very like high intensity storm events that are happening, you know, 1 inch, 2 inches in 24 hours, you're going to have the greater likelihood of those type of washouts.
Suzanne, I'll just comment on that real quick, that when it comes to individual instances, it's difficult to attribute whether something was or was not caused by climate change. Typically what you do is, and it would be for like larger things like a hurricane, you would provide a percentage. Well, it was, was this percentage stronger because the water was X percentage warmer, something along those lines.
Right. Instance by instance is not easy, but it's a big picture kind of illustration of what we can expect more of.
The amount of water that was released when the dam breached was not typical. You know, it's one of these things where, you know, the recent dams breaches, there's a number of reasons. One could be, you know, people are tearing the dam down. Another is the beavers have moved on because there's no food, you know, and as the dams get less resilient, you know, yes, you know, a rush of water will breach them, but you know, it's not the primary cause.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Well, I think this is an example of how we can very easily get sucked into a 45-minute conversation about beavers. And I appreciate that. Yeah.
Beavers are good.
They're good, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's kind of part and parcel of all of the numerous things we need to be thinking about. I think there was one more question.
Yes, go.
Yeah.
I know this is like at the ground zero level, but I think, you know, something that I would think of is having pre-mapped out detours and what the effect on transportation through detour routes is gonna be like, you know, are we gonna still be able to get people through the area?
Exactly.
If,
Yes. Yeah, and I think I can double check with the kind of the detailed examples, but definitely planning for redundancies in the system is really critical. There was also some great feedback from one of our, we had a engineering professor from UNH at the regional workshop who highlighted the fact that, well, when you can plan the detour, but often those roads have not been designed to handle that level of traffic. So that's going to kind of impinge upon the asset longevity there as well. So there's so much to think about, hyper complex. We're kind of giving you tools to get started on these conversations, and we're here to help, and we hope you stay involved as we
Yes.
do more planning.
One brief comment,
Yeah.
Suzanne, you talk about the education and outreach.
Yeah.
A lot of people view, and it comes back to what Zach was saying before, a lot of people view the issue through the lens of their own experience. So each attempt at, doing education and outreach, I think it's helpful to differentiate between climate and weather.
Yeah.
Climate and weather are not the are not the same.
Yeah.
There's what you expect and what you actually get over, a long period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yes. I have one, anyone from calling in, I want to give them the opportunity, has a question? No, I just have closing comments. Is the problems that we've had with the culverts, is it mitigated by just better maintenance? I mean, granted, you have these catastrophic weather situations. But I know, and going back to what Zach said, on my own street, I've simply taken a rake and cleaned leaves from the drains and everything. But overall, when you have culverts going under roads, if they're maintained, would you have this problem? Or will you always have the problem?
Maintenance is part of the equation, and I think it can help us a long way, but I would say, and Zach can weigh in, and this is on a case-by-case basis, I can't give you an opinion, but blanket wide, we are getting more precipitation, and some of these culverts will be undersized, just given the quantity of precipitation, even if they're fully cleared out.
Okay.
Can I,
Yeah.
One last comment.
In Chester, we require subdivisions to be designed in a way to manage their stormwater runoff and pre-development, post-development flows cannot exceed pre-development flows. The problem with that is the flows last longer as the precipitation events get longer, and cumulatively spread across Chester, we are seeing the culverts ending up being undersized, not just because of the precipitation amounts increasing, but because development keeps contributing to it.
Right.
There's no, I know that some places in Massachusetts require that excess runoff to be infiltrated on site, so it doesn't contribute to the overall runoff. But it's not mandated in New Hampshire, so it's not just maintenance.
Yeah.
It's the cumulative effect of development.
Okay. Thank you. Suzanne, Zach, thank you very much. Moving right along here, Bike-Ped housing session and review, Adam and Dave.
Adam, if you could share the screen for me, please.
Sure thing. Hold on one second here. Sorry about that. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Tilton, and along with my colleague Adam Lasney, we'll be presenting the 2023 Bike-Ped counting season in review. All right, since 2017, when SNHPC began collecting bike and ped data with one counter, we strive to get a regional approach to our bike and pedestrian counts. In 2019, we updated our equipment and added additional counters, which gave us the ability to count at more locations than we have previously. Since 2019, we've averaged 31 separate count locations per year. This list is drawn from a master list of 64 locations that include 24 sidewalk locations, and the remaining 40 are trail counts. We currently have 4 bike and ped counters, 2 eco counters. These are our portable counters that we move from site to site. We'll go to a location, set up the counter, leave it there for 3 weeks, come back, download the data, and move it to a different location. We also have 2 Trafex infrared counters. These are our permanent counters, and these stay in one location for the duration of a year. So we'll pick a spot, we'll pick a trail and pick a location along that trail. We'll set up the counter, and then we'll leave it there for a year. Staff will go back and download data every 3 weeks, but the counter will remain in place for the remainder of the year. This year, our locations for our permanent counters are the Londonderry Rail Trail and the Wyndham Rail Trail. Next slide, please. And here we have a map that shows the locations of our counts for 2023. The orange points that you see in the center of the screen are our sidewalk counts. Those were clustered in Manchester this year. And for greater detail of their locations, you can look at the inserts to the left. The blue points are our regional trail counts that are scattered throughout the region. And if you look to the southeast of Manchester, you'll see 2 purple circles. That represents our permanent count locations in Wyndham and Londonderry. Next slide, please. And so a couple of years back, a commissioner suggested that we count the Manchester trails. This was done to get a baseline of data and to see trail usage, how it changes over the course of time. So in the spring of 2022, 3 counters were placed on the Piscataquag in the Rockingham Trail, and 2 counters were placed on the South Manchester Trail. In the spring of 2023, the counters were placed at the same trails, same locations, with careful consideration to be placed at the same time as they were the previous years. This was to give us a comparable year-to-year data comparison. The data from 2022 was collected and put into a report that you can find on the SNHPC bicycle pedestrian section of our website. And the data from the 22 and 23 were compared and compiled into this graphic that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. We saw an increase in trail usage on South Manchester and the Rockingham Trail, but a decrease on the volume on the Piscataquag. The reason why we're not quite exactly sure yet, but it should be noted that the Heritage Trail was closed from December of 2022 through the first half of April 2023. We placed our counter on this trail at the end of April through the beginning of May of 2023, and we may have just been out there too early before trail usage got back to historical levels. Next slide, please. Oh.
Okay, so I'm gonna walk through some data here, starting with sidewalks in Manchester. Here on this chart, you see our 2 most populous locations, Elm Street at City Hall, and then Hanover Street at the Chamber of Commerce. Most of you are probably familiar with these areas. So the blue bar to the left is our 2020 counts. That's pre-COVID. We put them out in January, February. As you can see, as expected, 2021 was a huge drop-off for both locations, but even more so for Hanover Street. It recovered somewhat in 2022, and it continues to recover in 2023. And Hanover's up to about 70% of its pre-COVID pedestrian volume. Another application for our counters is to count pedestrians at an event. In this case, the Manchester Car Show that you may be familiar with, held Labor Day weekend each year. We counted, starting in 2017, you can see on the bottom left, that arrow pointing to where the counter was placed. 2017 and 2018 were pretty similar volumes. We had some issues with our data in 2019, and then 20 and 21, the show was not held due to COVID. But we put the counter out again in 2022 and 23, and as you can see, the volumes have rebounded, and we're now up to about 12% higher at that location than our first count in 2017. So an example of some trail data, I took a couple trails kind of at random here, the Hooksett Riverwalk and the New Boston Rail Trail. On the left, you'll see the Hooksett Riverwalk. We started counting there in 2019. Their trail system has expanded since then. So there was a gap in our counts here, but in 22, we saw quite an increase. And then 2023, it kind of leveled out, just slight decrease. And then in New Boston, we counted there in 21, the volumes rose in 22, and then there was quite a sizable decrease in 23. Our thought on that is it was simply the bad weather that we had this summer. This particular count was out in June, and as everyone remembers, we had a very rainy June. So all of these counts are affected quite substantially by weather, as you might imagine. So that's what we're thinking happened there. So next year, if the weather is better, I expect to see an increase again. So we've also been doing a long-term study, as Dave mentioned, Londonderry and Windham rail trails. So what I did here was put together a chart. What we're looking at is the average hourly volumes. So in the 4 seasons of the year. So in January, this is midnight of a given day. Going through the day, this is noon, and then through to the end of the day. So what we're seeing as a pattern is fairly even throughout the day. In January, a slight peak in the afternoon. And I should mention that Londonderry is the blue line and Windham is the black. Windham Rail Trail saw higher volumes across the board. April, the pattern was a little bit different. Windham had morning and afternoon peaks, and Londonderry was more even throughout the day, especially from 11 a.m. to about 4 or 5 p.m. July, as you might expect, people are getting out earlier to beat the heat. Windham and Londonderry both saw peaks around 9 a.m. and then gradually declined throughout the day. And then October, somewhat similar to April, but slightly less volume. Londonderry had, you can kind of see the peaks here, about 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. And Windham had a morning peak and then gradually declined throughout the day. So another way to look at this, these charts are broken down. The chart on the left is just Londonderry and the chart on the right is just Windham. So in Londonderry, comparing the usage across the seasons, they're color coded here. Blue is January, green April, red July, and orange October. So it's the same data, just displayed in a different way. Londonderry has more pronounced peaks in the summer and fall. But the rest of the year, it's quite even use throughout the day, as I've already mentioned. Windham, again, morning peaks in 3 of the 4 seasons, but in the winter, we saw a slight afternoon peak. So there's many ways to slice and dice this data, but I thought this kind of told a story of how people are using the trails. And then one more chart here, the highest average daily volumes for some of our trails this year. The highest one, as I mentioned, is Elm Street at City Hall, and this is where the counter was placed. Hanover Street at the Chamber is our second highest. This is the summer count on Hanover compared to the winter count on Hanover. And then followed by the blue are trails, by the way, and the orange are sidewalks. Windham Rail Trail at the depot is our highest trail volume, followed by Derry Rail Trail at Bowers Road, as well as some others. And the symbols mean these were counted in the summer, and the trails over here in Manchester were counted in the spring. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it gives you some idea of how the trails are used throughout the year. So with that, I will pass it back to Dave.
All right, thank you, Adam. So as each year unfolds, we learn new lessons and we come across unique circumstances, and this season was no different. A year or so back, we had one of our counters stolen while deployed in the field. So to combat this, we've purchased a couple of trackers that we've installed either on the back or the interior of our counters. This will allow us theoretically to be able to track the counter if it wanders off again. Thankfully, we have not yet had to put this into practice yet this year. And on another unique circumstance that we encountered this summer was we noticed that 2 of our counters were having trouble or stopped counting. We're having data collection issues. When we went out to check on them, we noticed that the portable counter was seen on the top right corner of the screen. The holes that the infrared beams come out of them were packed with debris. We'd clean the debris out. We'd pick up the counter, move it to a new location, come back 3 weeks later, and it would be packed with debris again. At first, we thought it might be vandalism, people not appreciating the counter on the trail and we're looking for ways to sabotage it. But that was quickly ruled out since we were moving the counters every 3 weeks to a new location throughout the region. So eventually we took the counter back into the office, opened it up, and we found out that it was colonized by a large colony of ants. The ants moved in at some point over the summer, and were packing the holes with debris. And as soon as we would clean them out, they would get back to work on packing them up again. So a can of compressed air and a couple of cycles as a sidewalk counter seemed to resolve the issues, and the ants were evicted. We also saw this in Wyndham on our permanent rail trail counter, as seen in the bottom right picture below. That one did not get to the same level as the portable counter because each 3 weeks when we go to download the counter, we would open it up to access the data console, and we would clean out the interior of the counter. But it was an issue that, as far as talking to staff, that we have not seen in the past. Next slide, please. And as 2023 wraps up and we're looking forward to 2024, we're always looking for ways to improve and make the Bike-Ped County program more robust. A couple of those things that we're looking to do in the next year, in the next couple of weeks, we're talking about locations for the 2024 permanent counters. Right now, we're looking at locations along the South Manchester Rail Trail and the Derry Rail Trail. We're also looking to improve the quality of data that we collect along sidewalks and trails by keeping an eye on emerging technologies. We're aware of a couple devices by a couple different companies that are looking to be able to count and classify trail and sidewalk users. This would be done using cameras and machine learning, much like our Litron traffic counter does now. And if once this becomes a reality, theoretically, we'd be able to tell the number of people passing by the counter on a trail, but also what mode of transportation were they using? Were they walking? Were they horseback riding, skateboards, snowmobiling? It would really allow us to get a lot more in-depth quality data than we do now. And we're also looking to get more input from our municipalities. And if anyone has any locations that they'd like counted, we're always willing to entertain those. Next slide, please. And one of the ways we're doing that is our request a count form. If you go to the SNHPC homepage, you'll notice to the left of the news and notices box are 7 clickable banners. If you click on the banner titled "How Can We Help?" it will take you to the webpage on the left-hand side of this slide. And if you click request a bicycle pedestrian counter link, it will take you to the Google form that is shown on the right-hand side of the slide. Fill that form out and submit it. And then we can discuss putting up a bike and pedestrian counter at a new location. Next slide, please. That's our presentation. Adam and I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Questions for Adam for within the room? Okay, questions for Adam from those calling in? Or Dave, whichever, excuse me. Yes, please go right ahead, Dan.
Yeah, for either of the gentlemen, how Manchester South Trail is not completed. I think there's still ongoing work with it. Just curious how you ended up picking that maybe as the 24 project.
Yeah, so these locations are not final. That was just one of the thoughts we had given that there's been expansion on it. I was out there yesterday. I do realize it's not completely open yet. So that could prevent us from doing that. We have counted in the past also on the South Manchester Trail just north of Gold Street. So that would be another option to put a counter there.
And just curious, Adam, do you think you got the one I observed probably the busiest is the Rockingham Trail? Do you think you have as good a data as you're going to get there?
That's another place we'd consider for the 2024 count. We have to do a little more research into exactly what spot to put it in. We were going to reach out to some folks in the city and see if they had any input. So it's not gonna be done in a vacuum. We're definitely going to be working with our city and town partners on this.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
This is more of a question with regard to the trails themselves. I know there's a there's a lack of interconnection between the Londonderry and the Derry Trail. Do anyone know when that's gonna be completed?
The Londonderry and the Dairy Trail?
Yeah.
They're both programmed, so the final, the final section in Derry going to Londonderry will happen after the 4A project. That will start at where 4A ends and go to the town line. That was a TAP project from 2 years ago. It's in the 10-year plan. I want to say 25 or 26, maybe the schedule for that. I'd have to look for sure. Richard might know off the top of his head.
No, I was gonna say that, they're not gonna do anything until after 4A's done.
Yeah.
And then, but, as he said, there is money, programmed for this. So it's simply a matter of, time,
Yeah.
you know, and,
It's really good to have the
And then
construction done
yeah,
during 4A.
the final portion in Londonderry that will connect to that piece that's gonna be that will connect southerly to the town line, is phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail. And that was proposed for CMAQ funding in the last cycle. And as a result of Gassett's deliberations a couple of weeks ago, is going to be included in the draft 10-year plan that hopefully will be sent to the governor tomorrow. So yes, we do anticipate that phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail is going to be funded through CMAQ funding, and that will connect to that final piece of Derry that's going to.
so there's actually 3 segments that have to be completed. The
Okay.
4A segment,
Yeah.
the segment from 4A to Londonderry, and then Londonderry to 28.
Correct.
Okay,
And that phase 7 is the crossing of 28,
Yeah.
is the big piece of that, yeah.
thank you, everyone.
One more.
Okay, two more, two more and then that's it.
Alright. I had ridden the Rockingham Trail into Manchester. And it just, boom, it ends. And I was wondering if there's ever gonna be any connection between the terminal point on the Rockingham Trail down to the river.
Do you want to answer that?
The corridor zones, the corridor is there. Part of the corridor has been taken over by basically squatters, local businesses that started to use that for parking because it's not being used by anything else. But the corridor from basically the LA Hospital down to Willow Street, down near South Willow Street and Queen City Ave is there. There are discussions at the city level of DPW and planning to build that out. It's not gonna be overnight. There's a lot of property rights concerns that have evolved because of that. Even city DPW is even using it for parking of their own, for their own employees. But it is in discussion to create that greenway trail from the LA all the way to downtown, which would tie into the Raise grant work that's already funded, already being planned, which is gonna create a connection between the north end of the South Manchester Rail Trail into the Million Rail Trail, up to Elm Street, and then over a brand new bridge over to Granite Street. So that'll all tie in, and those discussions are being had. Which leads into what I originally with the South Manchester Rail Trail. I was a commissioner that 2 years ago had brought up, can we start, doing some bike counts on some of these trails? And the idea was to pick a consistent location and consistent time of year, so we could gauge change in use over time. And the South Manchester Rail Trail was specifically targeted because we know that that is supposed to be connected to the Londonderry Rail Trail. And we wanted to see what that interconnection was going to result in as far as through traffic. Will that connection to Londonderry and Point South bring more pedestrian and bicycle traffic into the city on those trails?
Okay, thank you all. Let's, we're now into other business. Sylvia, any other business?
No.
No? Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn the MPO, please? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Calling to order the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission meeting Sylvia, do you want, could I have a motion to, on the minutes of October 24th?
Move to accept the minute. Effective from the October 24th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any corrections or omissions? Yes, Peter.
I have one, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, under new business, the SEDS project list update. Just towards the bottom of that discussion, the motion to adopt and the motion was seconded. It doesn't actually say that the motion, what happened with the motion, I believe the motion was approved.
Yeah.
We ought to have that.
Yeah, I think that's something that Art Rugg had actually.
Yeah, I
pointed
caught
out.
that, Peter, and it
Um,
emailed,
And I've corrected it in the original, but I'll,
Okay.
yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Sylvia, do you want to take attendance and also, action on the minutes, please,
I do. All right.
as amended?
So from Bedford, we have Danielle Ivanzik.
Present and abstain.
From Candia is Rudy. No, I think Rudy had to go. So Rudy blocked off. Chester, we have Andrew Haddock,
President abstain.
Deb Munson.
Here and yes.
Deerfield, we have Fred McGarry
Here and yes.
and Errol Rhodes. From Derry, we have Jeff Moulton
Here and yes.
and Richard Tripp.
Here and yes.
From Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart,
Here and yes.
Gary Schneckenberg,
Here and yes.
and online Al Eisenberg. If Al's still here.
Yes, here and abstain.
Thank you, Al. From Goffstown, we have Barbara Griffin
Here and yes.
and Colleen, if you're still there.
Yep, here and abstain.
Thank you. From Londonderry, we have Art Rugg
I'm here and yes on the minutes.
and Suzanne Brunel.
Here and abstain.
Thank you. From Manchester, we have Peter Capano,
Here and yes.
Ray Clement,
Here and yes.
Don Waldron.
Here and abstain.
Online, we have Marcus Ponce de Leon
Here and yes.
and Dan O'Neill.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Dan. From New Boston, we have Mark Sunan.
Here and abstain.
And Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin
Here and yes.
and Ed Lapointe.
Here and yes.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. New business, Southern New Hampshire Biofabrication Cluster and NextGen Manchester Resiliency Council. Would you like to introduce our guests?
I'm going to offer that Suzanne will do the introductions.
So we have a guest speaker today. I'm very excited to introduce Ashley Marcoux, and she is the executive director of the NextGen Manchester Resiliency Council. So for those of you who are familiar with kind of all of the activity that's happening in downtown in the Mill Yard around biofabrication, we have, Manchester applied for and received Build Back Better funding to help advance that work. There was also the recent announcement about the Manchester and Nashua corridor being designated as one of only 30 tech hubs around the country, which means we're actually eligible to apply for even more federal funding to support the development of the biofabrication industry. And so if you're like me and you don't know what that word means, don't worry. I feel like Ashley's going to dive in and tell us a lot more about it. SNHPC is very privileged to have a seat on that council, of the NextGen Resiliency Council, basically providing oversight to make sure that that Build Back Better money is used as effectively as possible. We're really thrilled that Ashley is the new ED who's been hired. I think you came on board in July, right?
Just about to say, yeah.
Yeah, she's really well suited to this role. She's a third generation resident of Manchester. She's trained as a policy analyst. She's been a community organizer. And she's also, her most recent role was at the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. So she has a lot of expertise. She's done amazing work with kind of calling together the work of many different projects that are happening around biofabrication. And I thought that this would be a great topic for her to share with folks in this room.
Mr. Chair, may I jump in? This is Peter Capano speaking. I want to add to that introduction that Ashley is also a volunteer in the city and is on our brand new housing commission. That's one.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Peter.
Hi.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for your kind introduction. And we are the ones who are privileged to have you on our board. So really appreciate your steadfast partnership in all of this work that I'm going to speak to today. I'm so excited to share the work of the NextGen Manchester Resiliency Council and its implications for economic growth and community development. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm going to begin, as Suzanne alluded to a bit, assuming that we don't have any biofabrication PhDs in the room. Maybe we do, but hopefully not. So I'm going to start simple with a bit of an introduction to what biofabrication actually is, a little bit of background on the history and kind of science behind what's powering the industry, before going into the New Hampshire Biofabrication Cluster, our coalition partners, and the projects that we are implementing to develop the future workforce with our local residents and advance the industry to global national prominence. And I hope to leave a couple minutes at the end for questions, but I will try and go quickly. Is it okay if we go over a few minutes, or is it a hard stop at 1?
Well,
I think if someone needs to leave, they'll leave. So you go for it,
Okay.
Ashley.
All right, I'm gonna go efficiently. How about that?
Thank you.
All right, so what exactly is biofabrication? This emerging industry is at the intersection of two primary technology areas, being biotechnology, medical technology, and synthetic biology, and also robotics, automation, and advanced manufacturing. So broadly defined, biofabrication is building with biology, or a process that results in a defined product that has a biological function. Numerous applications for this are being explored within the field, including tissue engineering and regenerative medicine, but also somewhat less conventional or maybe top of mind uses such as growing lab-grown leather or lab-grown meat. But the type that we're going to talk about today is the former, which is the industry that is advancing here in New Hampshire. So we're focusing on tissue engineering and regenerative medicine, but what are those exactly, or what do we mean in this context? So as you can see from the definition of tissue engineering on screen, or maybe not because the citation is kind of small, but this definition was termed by two researchers, Langer and Vacanti, in 1993. So this kind of science has been around for decades, and it may, Vacanti may kind of ring a bell because this was a hugely popular or, kind of viral image that went around in the late 90s, early 2000s that was one of the earliest applications of kind of the promise of biofabrication, which was using a scaffolding of a human ear and being able to regenerate the actual ear from within a host mammal subject. So the advancement of this industry presents an enormous opportunity to improve how chronic illnesses and traumatic injuries are treated, both among our families and friends here in New Hampshire and for people across the world. More than 6 in 10 Americans are currently living with at least one chronic health condition, and the endpoint of chronic illness is often organ failure. And 17 patients in the US die on the organ transplant waiting list each day. So a lot of inequity in our current system. And furthermore, these illnesses such as heart disease, diabetes, and kidney disease both cost the nation a lot of money in trying to treat and not actually cure, but also this problem is expected to get worse as our population ages. So will be an increasingly critical field and treatments to address. And I think as a longtime resident and someone who is very, interested and invested in seeing Manchester reach its potential, I think I don't want to say equally because we're revolutionizing healthcare, but I think it's extremely exciting to really bring Manchester back to its manufacturing roots in a modern sense. We used to be the textile manufacturing capital of the world, and with how the ecosystem is growing here in the mill yard, in the not too distant future, I think it's possible that we are the regenerative medicine, biofabrication, manufacturing capital of the world in our modern sense. So again, the potential of this field has been known for a long time. However, attempts to commercialize regenerative therapies have failed over the decades. And that's because there's been fragmentation across the disciplines that this industry brings together, like automation, biotechnology, advanced manufacturing, just not really working together. And also inconsistent manufacturing approaches and some regulatory challenges, because when you think about it, when you have a product that is FDA regulated, every Advil needs to look like an Advil. It needs to work like an Advil. And that is kind of the standard that we have with medical care. But when you are growing a organ or tissue or cells from a patient's own cells, you're going to have a lot more variations than you would when compared to when you're just, making an Advil. So in order to address these challenges, ARMI was founded, or ARMI, which is the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute, was formed in 2016 to really study and overcome these challenges. And they are a membership organization that brings together academia, industry experts, government, regulatory experts into a membership group to share expertise and provide support to startup companies and established companies to further commercialize and grow the therapies that they're working on. So I don't know if you can actually hear that. Can you hear that?
No, we can
You can't,
see it.
okay. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna play it for just a second. Just so you can see, I feel like it's helpful to kind of get a visual of what this actually looks like. And I'll share it around afterwards if you want to check it out on your own. But again, I'm sorry. I will share this one afterwards. But for those who might be learning about life sciences like myself, as I came into this position, it's helpful to see the technology in action. And when hopefully you get the chance to, it's just a minute, this first minute of the video. But if you do get a chance to look at it, the treatments that they're describing are not just ideas for the future, which I think is really exciting. There are people that are living with diabetes today who are already benefiting from therapies to grow and transplant islet cells, which are insulin-producing cells. And when these transplants, when people with type 1 diabetes receive these transplants, it can actually reverse type 1 diabetes temporarily. So you can go without an insulin pump, kind of live your daily regular life in a temporary way, and kind of demonstrates the promise of the field moving forward. So recognizing the transformative potential for biofabrication to improve health equity, catalyze economic development, and create high quality job opportunities for local residents, the City of Manchester convened a diverse cross-sector coalition of partners from industry, academia, government, and civic sectors to apply to the EDA's 2021 Build Back Better Regional Challenge. This was a highly competitive federal program, and over 529 coalitions from across the country applied. Of these, just 21 were selected as finalists, who received between $25 million and $65 million in funding for a portfolio of complementary, locally led projects that contribute to a coordinated regional economic development strategy. 5 clusters were chosen that focused on biotechnology and healthcare, including the Southern New Hampshire Biofabrication Cluster, which is comprised of 6 component projects that received $44 million in funding. So the NextGen Manchester Resiliency Council is the coalition that proposed this initial vision to transform the Southern New Hampshire economy through establishing a biofabrication cluster that will grow the regenerative medicine industry and lead the nation in producing and distributing regenerative tissues and organs. The coalition incorporated the NextGen Manchester Resiliency Council in January of this year as a nonprofit organization to support this strategy for growth and resilience through continued regional collaboration among implementation partners and stakeholders. The council serves as a coordinating body to ensure cohesive implementation of these projects. We don't want jobs or industries needing jobs ready at different times, so trying to match those up on our timelines. A public-facing entity for community engagement and progress reporting, a governance mechanism for strategic decision-making, and forward-thinking sustainable engine for industry growth and inclusive economic development. Our founding board is made up by the industry, academic, government, and civic partners who collaborated to create this proposal and are also leading implementation of these five additional projects. Several of these, such as the multimodal transit station, teaching airport, and pedestrian crossing to reconnect the mill yard to the west side, were initially proposed as part of this vision, but ultimately not funded through this award. However, members of these organizations remain active contributors to the coalition, creating a resilient collaborative capacity to advance these initiatives through future opportunities. So our mission as an organization is to foster the growth and development of Manchester and Southern New Hampshire by creating family-sustaining jobs and expanded opportunity through the growth of the biofabrication industry. We are doing this by providing on-ramps to workforce pipelines to members of our community who would otherwise lack access through our Work and Learn program, providing K through gray or traditional and non-traditional education and training programs that inspire students and current workers to pursue career opportunities in biofabrication, and attracting startup companies to form and grow in Southern New Hampshire, who will catalyze job growth and future industry investments. And by doing so, we will establish New Hampshire as a global leader in this industry, thereby increasing Manchester's annual GDP, raising regional household incomes, and reducing the number of families that are living in poverty. So these place-based investments build on the biofabrication ecosystem that is growing in the mill yard. And really the kind of ecosystem and assets that we have here are one of the biggest strengths that we have for attracting this type of federal investment, because if you're a startup company looking to commercialize a new therapy, you want to have everything that you need in one place. And that's kind of the place-based economic development around this manufacturing industry that is occurring through this grant and hopefully into the future. So these projects complement new and ongoing initiatives to both improve connectivity and vibrancy around the city of Manchester, such as the Raise Grant and the new murals around Arms Park and the downtown area, and general efforts to revitalize downtown and across the city. So this is a conceptual map that shows the 5 projects that the coalition is implementing under the Build Back Better grant. And the largest of these projects is a 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility that will be located at 150 Dow Street. And this facility builds upon the capabilities established at the Biofabrication Tissue Foundry, which is a video I hope that you can watch, by creating a facility for late stage clinical and commercial manufacturing, and a 20,000 square foot adjacent training and innovation center, also located at 150 Dow. This facility will be suitable for the scaled production of cells, tissues, and organs as life-saving therapies, and is expected to be completed in 2025. And it's worth noting that currently there's no other facility in the United States that has this type of outsourcing capacity. Other projects in the cluster include a startup lab or accelerator, an electric vertical takeoff and landing logistics network for organ distribution, a multi-pronged work and learn or workforce development program that is scaling existing project-based learning initiatives like BioTrack, creating new interactive ways to engage with biofabrication through initiatives like the STEM mobile lab experience, and offering new skills-based training opportunities through the biofabrication technician and manufacturing certificate programs and registered apprenticeship programs. And in all, over the next 5, 10 or so years, we expect that this work will catalyze job growth in the around 45,000 total jobs, about 7,000 direct. So the Biofabrication Startup Lab, I wanted to kind of just I feel like it's interesting to illustrate really like what these companies are working on and what we might expect to see grow here in the future. So this is an incubator that provides wraparound support for startup companies such as business, finance, and regulatory services to accelerate regenerative therapies from lab scale fabrication to commercial manufacturing. And in its first year, the startup lab received over 3 times the number of applications that it could to accept the program, 8 of which have been accepted within the first cohort. So last month, the Startup Lab held its inaugural investment summit, which startup companies had the opportunity to showcase their technologies to potential investors. And 21 startups presented there, showcasing technologies that ranged from potential cancer treatments to electronic stem cell counters, technologies to treat neurodegenerative diseases of the gut, to bioimpedance-based medical sensors to detect, monitor, and treat a variety of different diseases. And that last technology, the sensor, is being developed by a group called Rytech Medical, which is a startup company that was founded out of Hanover and one of the first companies accepted to the inaugural cohort of startup companies. So once tissues and organs are fabricated at the manufacturing facility, they will need to be transported to regional hospitals through a vertiport or electric vertical takeoff and landing distribution network to reach patients quickly in the time that they need. Build Back Better is funding the first phase of creating this distribution network by establishing an initial vertiport site close to the manufacturing facility, ideally within the mill yard. However, because this is an emerging aerial technology, finding a site that fits FAA requirements has been a challenge. Sites that have been scoped as potential locations include the Manchester Armory, the roof of SNHU's parking garage, Eversource, and the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport. However, each has presented unique challenges or is beyond the preferred distance of within 1 mile of the manufacturing facility. Given the expertise in this room, I just wanted to kind of raise that challenge and have it in your mind in case you have any input or ideas on how we might solve this kind of site selection question. And I'd encourage you to please reach out to me or connect with Suzanne if you'd like to discuss or want more information or have any ideas.
Okay,
We have the specs for that.
I'm sorry, what's?
We have the specs for the vertiport in terms of required space. So if anybody's interested,
Okay.
Feel free to reach out.
Are you accepting questions now, or do you still have more?
I have 4 more slides and then I'll go to questions.
All right.
So just wanted to talk a little bit more about our workforce development initiatives. So this is kind of the portfolio of programs that are through the Work and Learn program, which is led by Southern New Hampshire University in partnership with the University of New Hampshire, Manchester Community College, and Army. And they fall within 3 strategies to inclusively develop our local future workforce to support biofabrication growth. So first, we are reducing known barriers to accessing job, education, and training opportunities by increasing support for English as a second language learners with a focus on STEM-related programs, investing in technology upgrades at public facilities, such as the Manchester City Library, which was the first technology upgraded, which was completed this past summer, and conducting a transportation equity study that will inform additional efforts to increase connectivity in the mill yard and help ensure that the cost of public transportation is not a barrier for Work and Learn program participants or potential participants. Second, we're expanding and launching new programs to educate and inspire students within the field of biofabrication. BioTrek is an established 2-week immersive project-based learning experience that is offered at high schools across New Hampshire and some in Massachusetts. And Build Back Better funding is expanding this program to be offered at more local schools with a primary focus on increasing offerings at low-income schools. Manchester Creates is a new program at UNH derived from the successful New Hampshire Creates program at the Durham campus that is going to offer summer youth programs in biofabrication to middle and high school students beginning in summer of 2024. And something that we are all very excited about and is going to be very visible is the UNH's new STEM mobile lab experience, which will bring lab science and hands-on learning to students and communities across New Hampshire, rural, urban, and everything in between. And finally, new student employment opportunities to work at biofabrication companies are being offered to undergraduate and graduate students at UNH, SNHU, and MCC. And Army has partnered with MCC to offer a new certificate and registered apprenticeship program for biofabrication technicians, with the plans to launch an additional program in biofabrication manufacturing over the next few years. So as I was getting ready to speak with you last night, I was reading closely the Transit-Oriented Development Plan, and I'm very excited to share the objectives and eventual results of a transportation equity study that the coalition is currently conducting in partnership with the Volpe Center. So the goal of this study is to connect residents from underserved populations with access to education and opportunity in the Millyard TOD district and the biofabrication cluster. And we hope to do this by improving equitable and multimodal connections between Greater Manchester and downtown and within the Manchester Millyard TOD district. An RFP was recently released for a community engagement partner to help with this work, which will be ongoing through July of 2024, at which point we will share the results and planned implementation steps with stakeholders and community members. And lastly, as Suzanne mentioned in her introduction, you may have heard that recently we earned EDA designation as one of, I believe, 31 regional industry consortiums as a national tech hub. So what this means is, I feel like the easiest way to explain it is if you get like a fishing license, then you can go fish and like you might catch the fish and that's great. But if you don't have a license, then like you can't go fishing at all or you're doing it illegally, so you shouldn't be doing it. So this designation is like our fishing license to potentially get 40 to 70 million additional dollars of investment in growing not just the industry, but really everything in this ecosystem to support industry growth. So things from childcare, supports to additional supports for startups. We're kind of in the brainstorming and ideation phase of this. But this proposal is being led by Army, and NextGen is playing a key role on kind of the governance committee to help, formulate our proposal, and then eventually, if we do receive more funding, to help coordinate implementation. And that is all I have. So we are launching a website over the next month or so. So keep an eye out. And in the meantime, we have a quarterly newsletter that you can sign up for, which is you just scan that kind of note on the screen or connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm always happy to kind of discuss more and just, learn your thoughts and ways that we might be able to work together on improving our community in the future.
Questions for our guest and in-house?
Real quick.
Yes, please.
Have two of any existing heliports or helicopter landing sites in the Millyard been looked at?
Oh, can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Have either of the two existing helicopter landing pads that are in the Millyard now been looked at for potential VTOL sites?
So I was going through the engineering brief for the FAA for the Vertiport recently, and it's a question that I want to clarify, but my sense from the brief is that because there's so little known about eVTOL aircrafts and how they perform under duress and how much space they need, that the required landing space for them right now is larger than what a traditional helicopter would need. But I haven't confirmed that with anyone, and I'm not actually certain, but that's my sense. And happy to, get a clearer answer on that. I think it's a, logical question to be asking, but yeah.
Any additional questions in the house? Any questions from those of you calling in? I guess that's it. Ashley, this is tremendous. Thank you so much. I'm Peter Griffin, I'm chairman of Southern New Hampshire Planning. It's a great opportunity for the region.
Well, I was thrilled to be able to present today and hoping that, you know, we're not strangers in the future. Suzanne has been such an asset to our board and just really grateful for this partnership. So thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Other business.
The only thing is a reminder that our next meeting, Linda, is it on the 21st?
I think it's the 19th.
I think it's the third Tuesday.
19th.
So we're celebrating a birthday evidently on that day. Anyway, so please make note, it's the third Tuesday, not the fourth Tuesday of the month.
Ray, do you, as public comments, do you have any comments?
Well, that's why I came.
Well,
Yes, I do.
understand we're over time, but we do welcome your comments.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'll try to be brief. What I was gonna speak on, what was brought up in regards to water, stormwater, and the roads and so forth, the impact on the roads and so forth, which is very important. And one thing I just wanted to say, which was brought up, was seasonal maintenance, which should be done by the local town, DPW and so forth, and that's up to them to do that. But stormwater runoff is a problem that impacts roads, bridges, and culverts and so forth. And so I think we have MS4, which a lot of the municipalities, particularly cities and towns that have high population, that have a responsibility to oversee. And the effects on development is a big issue. You know, I'm from Londonderry, so we have a lot of development. And I think that we in locally need to make sure that the development is and the runoff from the development, pavement and so forth is watched. The other thing is when we're talking about stormwater, we're talking about water, a very vital resource. And from my standpoint, my point is about water and contamination from stormwater runoff that affects also wildlife. I think there was some discussion about that. And public involvement. We do need to get the public involved. The public is burdened with a lot of things, but they do need to be part of the decision. And we do need to get the word out to the general public and make them aware of what they can do on their own property. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for joining us, Ray. I appreciate it. Any insights from the commissioners? You're in sightless today? Okay. But I have a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
All right.
It's unanimous. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. See you in 3.
I didn't acronym overload though. That's what.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.